Welcome everyone to i4J's third interactive video presentation Q&A session with Alan Blue, co-founder of LinkedIn. So Alan's topic today is, will technology save our jobs or it destroys them? And I think you'd all agree that there's no one more qualified than Alan to speak about this topic. So this is a really great privilege. Now, David and Vint, in their entrepreneurial way, have encouraged me to host this series for i4J. And as you may soon discover, it's not my day job, but I'll do a quick intro just so you know what the heck I'm doing. My name is Ben Baldwin. I'm the founder of a company called ScaleDriver. It's innovation consulting, but instead of consultants, we match executives and innovators with this agile framework that helps predict innovation and speed it up so that everybody succeeds. Now, so that makes it obvious that I love these topics. So I'm really excited for Alan's topic today. And I love the idea of using live video like this in particular, because I think it fills a gap between our i4J conferences and email discussions. And I also think it's a great way for us to introduce ourselves to the group, share what we're working on in an informal way, maybe even ask. So this Zoom video technology allows a handful of people or speakers to interact in real time with Alan. So please heckle Alan. But you can take your microphone off mute manually, but just remember to put it back on mute when you're done talking. So while Alan's talking or someone else is talking, if you could just make sure that you keep your microphones on mute, that would be great. And it's also worth noting that we are recording this session. So I'm just letting you know we can share this with other people afterward. And all I request is that if you have a question, just introduce yourself to Alan so that he and the audience kind of know who you are. And then you can also use the chat feature on the right side of the screen to get in touch with people in the group or myself. And you can tell me if there's something in my teeth if you really want to. And I'd appreciate knowing about that. So the way this technology works, we're still in the learning process, but I think we've got it pretty ironed out. So without any further ado, what I'll start off by doing is just turning it right over to Alan. And so take it away, Mr. Blue.
Hey, everybody. So, and thanks, Ben, for hosting and putting this all together. So let's see. So I am highly desirous of this being a conversation. I think it's much more useful, especially because a lot of these things are new to us, and we're all kind of co-creating the ideas which are going to help us think about jobs in the changing economy, that we have a conversation about it. So this will be just an introduction from me and about a project that we're working on at LinkedIn, which I think is closely related, but I know is closely related to the question around jobs in a new economy. But then I'm looking forward to the conversation. So I thought I'd start out just by sort of talking a little bit about my own sort of view and position regarding what the sort of long-term future of jobs actually looks like. Because I think it's important to sort of understand where we think the project, at least where I think the project at LinkedIn fits into the overall picture. So we've all read, or I assume we've all read, much of the good scholarly work which has been done about the changing world of jobs. So basically, twin forces of globalization and technology basically making a big difference in terms of the way jobs and the economy actually function. But the technology side is accelerating exponentially and is going to make unpredictable impact on the economy as we go forward. In the long term, so I think pretty much all bets are off regarding what we're actually looking at for jobs in the economy in, say, 30 or 40 years. It used to be a very long time horizon, 30, 40 years. It turns out to be a short time now because the change is happening so quickly to us. We're going to really feel it as we go along. I think the forces of globalization are generally bottoming out. I think we're getting to the place right now where it's unlikely that the things which reshaped the economy in the 70s, 80s, and 90s are going to have substantial future effects. There is a lot of globalization effect which is going to happen, which is primarily about opening up new markets. The number of people in the world who are part of the formal economy is only a fraction of people who actually are alive today. So there's going to be a lot more people coming into the workforce and coming into the economy in the next 10 or 15 years. That'll happen quickly, much more quickly than it has in the past. But I think that's the primary impact we're going to see in terms of global change. The thing which has always driven globalization, which has been basically a connection between cheap labor in one place, expensive labor in another, and the ability to export that labor. Those forces are going away. First, the cheap places are getting more expensive, but also the cost for creating things in the expensive places is coming down. And that's largely due to the technology and automation we're talking about. The technology change is going a lot faster and is beginning to threaten things which seemed like they would be untouchable. We all know about truck drivers and about self-driving cars and factory automation and so forth. But there are companies out there which are currently experimenting with and making great inroads on things like financial advice, which are used to be considered solely the province of human beings, and now it's possible that machines will be able to do those things better. There's some components of medicine which are in that category, and that list is only going to grow over time. I basically think that that it's actually not possible for us to set a goal of keeping everybody employed. I just don't know that that's actually going to be something which we're going to be able to achieve. I think instead we need to think about the problem a little differently, which is I want to think about the problem as how do we navigate a transition between where we are today, where we have relatively high employment, into a world in the future where we have relatively low employment. Let's say that transition will take 30 to 40 years. If that's actually, how do we actually navigate from where we are today to where we're going to go? So there are three big areas which I think we need to focus on. And these are very high level areas. And this is where the conversation comes in. So the first one is, I think we need to move people, at least in the short term, to where the jobs are. So long as there are places where there are jobs that are open and there are places and there are people who need those jobs, you got to figure out a way to get them over there. So there's a whole bunch of types of jobs that are in danger, either in danger today or in danger in the future. And they're basically the things where human beings are doing something fairly narrow in scope. That means a relatively small number of tasks they have to do, or places where where it doesn't actually have to be a human doing the work. So for instance, in the world of medicine, in the world of teaching and so forth, we're likely to retain human beings as an important component of that work for a long time because people want to work with other people. In the cases of automation in factories and taxi drivers and so forth, which most of us don't interact with as it is, it's not actually that important to have a human being there. So those things are very much at risk. So those are the kind of jobs that we're likely to lose, and that'll be continuous rolling loss of jobs in those areas. So what kind of jobs should the people be moving to? And the answer is that they should be moving to jobs which have at least a certain amount of longevity, predictable longevity. In other words, getting into that job will give me 5 years or more of actual productive work. The second thing is it really needs to provide a foundation of skills which I can take with me to what the next thing is. So I don't have a great name for these jobs, but these are jobs like, let's say, solar technicians. So we believe there's going to be a big need for solar in the future. There's a big need for solar now. People who are going up and setting up solar on people's houses and so forth, you learn a set of skills which have to do with the technology, but you also learn a general set of business skills which can then be applied to other stuff. So that kind of job, even if it goes away in the future, has actually prepared people for the next thing, which is actually a very valuable job to actually have taken. It also pays pretty well, so it's a good job to have in the short term. A job very much like we mentioned truck drivers and so forth, those are tough because once they go away, the set of skills you've acquired don't actually transfer very well to what the future actually looks like. So you kind of get left behind, and that's very much what we want to avoid. So I don't have a good name for these things, but I'm going to call them leap jobs. They're almost like they're a job that you can leap to and from which you can leap to the next thing. Those are the kinds of things that we need to make sure people are moving to. So that's point number one. How do we move people from the world of the jobs we're in today to the place where the jobs actually are? The second thing, and this has less to do with technology, so I'll go through it quickly, is how do we create a bunch of new jobs? I went to a fascinating lecture at Stanford 3-4 weeks ago now, where two visiting scholars were talking about a sort of historical precedent for what we're looking at now. They dug very deep into 1935 to 1938, right about the time when the Depression was occurring and then the Dust Bowl happened. So the Dust Bowl that happened was actually an economically created disaster, which I think was very interesting. And it's a very interesting history and kind of very cool to look at. But the main question was, did the fact that the Roosevelt administration was actually able to attack things through the WPA and so forth in the economic era, could that be applied to major ecological disaster as well? The reason I bring it up is obviously that we're basically in a place right now where we're facing a major ecological disaster. So climate change is going to be a tremendously potent force in the next 20 or 30 years. It's already a potent force. And the kinds of, say, refugee crises and so forth that we see today coming from Syria, which are people being displaced by war, are going to be dwarfed by the refugee crises caused by people being displaced by climate change. So that's an opportunity. It's too bad it comes from a crisis. But the question is, could we take advantage of that crisis in order to be able to create a whole new set of jobs, and better yet, a whole new set of leap jobs? So energy production, especially clean energy production, the technologies and the needs for relocating people, transportation, reducing the carbon footprint for transportation, changes in agriculture necessary to feed people, but growing in different places in the world, conservation, all of these things will be great opportunities. And there will be other chances for us to build similar projects in the future, which don't necessarily have to do with climate change. But if we can work together to make them happen, we got a bunch of things we need to do to make the future low cost. Imagine a world where basically we have 50 to 60% unemployment. In an environment like that, the only way to make sure the 50 to 60% of people who don't have work are able to live healthy lives is you got to make sure that the cost of living is relatively low. So something like a universal income or whatever could possibly support people in that environment. So there's a lot of basic research, a lot of infrastructure, and a lot of fundamental work to be done in agriculture, in healthcare, and so forth, in order to make that possible. So that's creating new jobs. And I think we may have to rely, to a certain extent, on the crises of the future in order to give us an opportunity to do that. The final bit is about culture change. I hope you've all read Eric Bringelson's and Annie McAfee's book about called The Second Machine Age, which is basically talking about the kind of economic change driven by the technology boom. So exactly what we're talking about here today. Totally worth reading. And they bring up a very important point. They quote Voltaire talking about work saving us from boredom, vice, and need. I think it's an important component. That boredom notion is a little concerning. A lot of people take their sense of purpose from the work they actually do. And if we're actually moving into a world where a lot of us aren't working, where's that sense of purpose actually going to come from? We know that people who don't have purpose turn to places where they can get it. And sometimes the places you can get purpose aren't necessarily healthy for all of us. And we can think about, the story, the trial, which is actually happening today in Minneapolis about kids from Minneapolis going off to join ISIS because they were looking for presumably because they were looking for some sort of purpose. That's not the common case, obviously, but it's an important one to consider. There's a lot to talk about on the culture front. We're not going to cover it at great depth today. So we've got three big areas: moving people from where there are no jobs to where there are jobs, creating new jobs, and accomplishing culture change. Where can technology actually play a role here? And I think the best way to talk about, at least from my perspective, is to talk about some work that LinkedIn is doing right now about attacking that first problem, the one about how do you move people from where there are no jobs to where there are jobs. A few years ago, we began working on a project internally. We were talking about essentially closing the skills gap in the U.S. or actually in the world. It was called the Economic Graph. The economic graph is basically a way of taking a look at the entire picture of how the economy works and then being able to take advantage of that data in order to locate where there are opportunities to close things like the skills gap. And having that kind of data and really understanding how the economy works is a key component of actually doing that. At the beginning of last year, we met the Markle Foundation. The Markle Foundation, for those of you who don't know, is a philanthropy / sort of action tank. I don't know if that's a good word to use, as opposed to a think tank, which is based in New York, run by Zoe Baird. And their main focus is how do we take technology and apply it to solve pressing social and economic problems. They had put together a group of people who were writing a book, which is worth reading. I was not part of it. They were just finishing it when we met them for the first time. It's called America's Moment, and it was released, I guess, end of last year, I think. So worth picking up and reading because there's a lot of good essays in it. It's a different tack than the I4J book, and so worth adding to your list of considerations in terms of the way you're thinking about this problem. It turns out we had common cause, the two of us, because we were both trying to solve this very specific problem about moving people into the jobs that actually exist. And the observation was basically this. There's a bunch of industries out there right now who desperately need people. We've talked to people in advanced manufacturing. We've talked to people in oil and energy production, but specifically in managing our energy grids. We've talked to people in nursing. We talked to people in education, and there are millions in the U.S. There are millions of open jobs in those areas. I mean, PG&E, when we talked to them, said that they didn't know how to solve the problem they've got. They're looking at massive attrition due to retirement, and they're not bringing people in at the beginning who have the skills necessary to become the sort of mainline workers and then the leaders at PG&E. So they're trying to solve that problem. And that's a skills gap problem. They can't find the people who can actually take those jobs. That's a tremendous opportunity for us. And we were like, hey, I bet we could leverage that opportunity to be able to create something, because it all comes down, from our perspective, to building an ecosystem which contains the sort of three people who make up, with the three groups we believe make up the economy. So first is obviously the companies who do the hiring. The second is the educators who train people to be prepared for that. And then the third is the individuals themselves. I came across this idea for the first time a couple of years ago. In 2012, I was doing a panel, and I met a community college president. And that community college president basically told me he had solved the skills gap problem in his area around his community college. And I thought that was awesome. So I asked him how he had done it. And he said that it was pretty easy. What he had done is he had gone out and he had realized his students, not just kids, but his students, weren't getting jobs. So he went out and talked to a bunch of local employers and figured out what they needed to hire for, and then created curricula. And those curricula were specifically focused on how they would on delivering individuals who could go work at those companies. So they developed nursing programs, a special program for teaching people how to assemble high quality lasers, and very specific stuff. And they had huge placement rates among that group of people for these programs. And it turns out this process, this where it brings educators and employers and then the people they're hiring together in the same place, is actually being used everywhere in the United States. It's just being used in little bits here and there. So that kind of inspired us to create this product, which collectively we call Skillful. We released it in about 6 weeks ago now in Denver, and it'll expand to the entire state of Colorado, but also in Phoenix, Arizona. And here's basically how the system starts working, which is the stage we're in right now. There are employers in each of those locations who have hard to find, who are looking for hard to find talent, places where who have the skills, they're having a hard time finding them. Some of those employers know which of the training programs in, say, the Phoenix area they count on in order to be able to train some of those employees, and have even done that thing the community college president did, which is to say, work together with an educator to create a program. So we've talked to Boeing about this and so forth. Boeing is a great example. They worked with the Maricopa community colleges in order to create a program which prepares people to work basically assembling aircraft and other stuff they build at Boeing. And they have super high placement rates coming out of those systems. So what we've asked them to do is, in our system, the ecosystem that we're building, to point to the programs which actually make sense, so this program they co-created. When they point to it, then individuals can see that. So now here I am an individual, and I go to our training finder, and I can see that that program is essentially endorsed by Boeing. So now I know if I'm interested in going and working on that job at Boeing, I know which programs form the path between me and that job. And that's actually something which we believe that's something which not only is it going to be able to create a remarkable and unprecedented resource for the individual who's looking for a job, we also think it's going to create something which will allow other employers to copy the same system. So what we would like to be able to do is see employers presenting which programs work, more people applying to that, and more people taking those courses. More people, employers saying, oh, we want to have people who are trained in that too, so using the same courses to again increase attendance in those classes. Those things are the way it starts. But here's where we want to get to with the project. Once we actually have something like this up and operating, and we're still very early days, so there's still things we got to work out in terms of getting it up and operating. What we're actually going to end up with is a really good portrait of the supply-demand structure in the given area, so say in Phoenix. We're going to know what employers are actually looking for. We're going to know where programs actually exist to train those people, and if there are enough of them. And we're going to know where they aren't. And we're going to be able to present that information out to other educators and say, you've got a great opportunity here because there's an employer who has high demand for this set of skills, maybe more than one employer. If you work with them and create a class, which basically trains those people, then you'll be able to drive really significant results for the people who are actually taking those classes. We believe that system will grow on itself over time and will, we hope, become a mechanism which provides fast, highly accurate feedback into the system for education and for individuals about what skills are needed and where you can go to get that training. The reason I'm bringing it up in the context of technology is that this is all reliant on a set of things that LinkedIn has been working on and many others have been working on over time. The first is this notion of reputation. Reputation has been represented online since eBay and beyond, sort of buyer and seller ratings and so forth. Here we have educators who essentially have a reputation score for the classes they're creating. That reputation score formed by the employers who actually endorse their training. We have a big data approach because we're looking at large-scale data to be able to derive small-scale insights. Tremendously important and tremendously valuable for educators and employers and even individuals as they make decisions. Third is just that general notion of internet-based information access. John Seeley Brown has talked about it forever. He coined the terms around it. That idea that basically the primary value of the internet is making information ubiquitous. So now these tools, which in the past would have required an individual to spend hours and hours and hours with a college counselor or whatever, are now available right in front of me online. Social networks allow individuals to be able to take advantage of relationships inside and outside the company to be able to make them successful. And the types of education we hope to create, because this isn't just about putting skills gap information in front of existing employers, but putting it as educators, but putting it in front of new educators, potential educators as well. We think we'll be able to support the growth of coding boot camps. We think we'll be able to support the growth of alternative education mechanisms, fully online, taking advantage of all the advances in ed tech that we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years. That's the project. I'm obviously more than happy to talk about that stuff. The future holds similar kind of stuff in the world of entrepreneurism, in the world of global economic planning and visibility, which we can see coming in terms of LinkedIn's future. So I guess in conclusion, I would say that I don't know that we can do anything about keeping the world employed, but I do think technology, at least in this area, can help us navigate the change between here and there. So that's it. Please, Let's talk about it.
I bet that's not it. But thanks, Alan. I will open it up to anybody who wants to ask questions. I have one quick one to ask first, though.
Yeah.
How important is timing in all this? So timing in where and when, which technologies are available, and then also the length of time it takes to skill up in a particular job. Like my friends who are running startups, they just don't have time for people to develop the skills that they need. For instance, that's one type of job. Another type of job might be a little bit easier to get skilled up. How have you been thinking about that?
Well, so one of the reasons that we wanted to work with educational institutions, just to be clear, LinkedIn is also working. We purchased lynda.com, which is an online training program or online training service last year. We're integrating it into LinkedIn now. That's for training at a company. So in other words, I have an existing employee and it's for many things, but it's certainly for that. But we wanted to make sure that we were taking advantage of training which was happening outside, because you're right. An employer can't wait for an individual to take on the skills, especially if they're a complex set of skills. You're going to become a nurse. That's 2 years of schooling, whether you want it to be or not. It just takes time. So that's why we wanted to make sure we were engaging the outside educators. So what they were doing is they were pre-creating a supply of people who would essentially be ready to work, because we know the employer can't wait. The general comment about timing is that basically this all has to happen really, really fast, because the change that we're looking at is upon us as we watch the first fleets of self-driving trucks crossing Europe. We can see a future right around the corner where these solutions need to be in place.
Thanks. That's a good answer. Does anybody else have a question? I could ask Alan questions all day, but figured I'd open it up to someone else. All you need to do is unmute.
I'd love, can you hear me okay?
Yep. Oh, who's that? I'm just switching my head around. I see the Brady Bunch little squares here.
But, it's Lucian.
Right in. Yeah.
Lucian from Brave New. Hey, Alan, thank you for this. I can't tell you how good the timing is. I'm speaking with the whole Markle Foundation team in half an hour.
Oh, fantastic.
Robert,
say hi to him for me.
Advisor. Yeah, this is like prep. So question for you is, I love the idea of creating an ecosystem and bringing together all the different stakeholders that because right now, employers, educators, and individuals are siloed, and it's not an efficient system there. Yeah. What about, we can think of this almost like in some sense, kind of going back to the future, like a digital guild, in some sense, I think. So what about, there's absolutely a role for formal learning, formal training, that, content coming from educators. What about the just-in-time knowledge, the tribe knowledge? What about the informal piece, enabling more of the kind of peer-to-peer? So taking some of those employees at Boeing, for example, and enabling them to be, if you like, mentors or coaches to prospective talent in that region. I'd love your views on how we can more enable. John Seeley Brown's one of our advisors, investors in this notion. His notion of kind of the culture of learning as opposed to the culture of training, as a top down to bottom up. So, any views on the informal side?
Yeah, so I agree with the culture of learning versus the culture of training. I mean, I think that the training learning separation is something which will probably get very blurry in the future. And the reason that's the case is that the rate at which people need to be trained will be so high, because we're talking about changing skill sets every 5 years or less. I think what that means is we can move safely into an environment of kind of constant interaction with learning new skills and training. And I think that becomes a more educational kind of environment. But who knows? The main thing for us when we're doing this is flexibility. We are proposing this solution, the skillful solution. It is not necessarily the right thing. And at the very least, we know it has to be flexible. If it isn't flexible, then we're not going to be able to actually to learn what really works. And there's no one solution. What works in 2018 or whatever is going to be different than what works in 2022. So that is so the main thing for us is to have a system which is as open as possible, has as little complexity as possible, as little prescription as possible of the way it works. So when we talk about training, that training can include, it doesn't right now, that training can include apprenticeships, internships, on-the-job learning experiences. It will include the experience you have at previous companies. It will include the training you received inside companies. There's lots of possibilities for things which could be part of that you could sort of take with you.
It's like an adaptive environment that's,
it couldn't be more important.
Learning, I guess, being able to be responsive to the ongoing needs and let data shape how what you're sharing with people.
And experimentation. So the idea of a digital guild, I think, is one of the many things we have to try. In the end, one of the things that's been best for me about this entire experience is finding the number of human beings out there who have thought about this problem and have come up with a wide variety of interesting solutions. And we basically need to try all of them because the need is so intense to get ahead of this problem. So we've got to try our digital guilds. We've got to try alternatives to labor unions. We've got to try, mechanisms for online learning, and we've got to try, specific kinds of policy changes in order to allow all those things. We got to try that stuff. So,
thank you.
So I had a question about learning too, but what I think Jan already addressed that part. I think that one of the issues is what I think Gregory Bateson was calling meta learning, which is how do you learn to learn? And I think that's basic if you talk about kids or young students or stuff like that. And about older people, transferable skills, which I feel like a little bit Google has done when they were hiring. They were thinking, if this kind of position disappears in 3-5 years, can I use this person? I think that's the attitude, but
that's what I was trying to get at with the leap job thing, which is whether the employer thinks you can retain that person and put them on something else, or whether that person can then leap to another position based on what you learned at this one. Absolutely essential. But you are completely right about the very early learning. So I mentioned adaptability of the system a minute ago, but adaptability of the human brain is going to be really important too. Learning how to learn will be essential. There are ways to train people to learn how to learn, to be educable. There are ways to do that. So one of the things which I would love to hear people's thoughts on is there a system, a kind of strategic system or an ecosystem which could affect what we do in K through 12 education? I know we can make this skillful thing work or something like it work because the employer brings a ton of money to the table. They're going to hire people. They're out there advertising for people. They're out there planning to pay to train people. The employer provides the energy which makes the entire system work. But the employer is not part of the K through 12 ecosystem. It's just too early in the process. So because of that, I don't know what the forces are which actually can reshape K through 12 education the same way. So if anybody has recommendations, I would love to hear them.
Can I say something on that?
Please.
So what I do is...
One quick sec. Can you introduce yourself just before?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my name is Cosmin, and what I do is I'm what is called, and what I want to say is called cultural intelligence consultancy. So that means that I optimize the relationships between people who have different values and beliefs, whether they are organizational values and beliefs, culture, national, ethnic, generational, gender. So now going back to responding to your question, that's exactly what I see, for example, in the school where my child goes. The focus is how do you make these kids have a flexible, open, but at the same time structured mind. It's a very fine line. So in terms of education is, and that's possible with adults too, but it's way easier with kids. So because what we absorb these values, beliefs, expectations, symbols, mostly between 0 and 10 years old, and we absorb that unconsciously, many of them. And then from that unconscious, some of them become conscious, some of them are accepted, some of them rejected. But from there, they direct behavior. So I think that the point is, how do you create this type of education? And I think that there is a way. I mean, it's a similar way, the way I work with people when I optimize relationship between people. I mean, when you look in Silicon Valley, there's people from all over the world. And being diverse, and you were talking, I'm going to refer to what you were saying, moving people to where the jobs is, the utilitarian part of it is going to be easy. the difficult, because creating diversity is not hard. Creating inclusion is hard.
Yes,
and
I
I
agree.
think that this is why, everybody praises themselves for how diverse they are. But diversity without inclusion is either, okay, either useless, either actually harmful. So, and there is research showing that diversity creates 6 to 12 times more efficiency than homogeneous teams. However, only if inclusion was applied. So going back to, these are two things that I wanted to put out there, related to early education and related to moving people from different regions to another region for work.
Totally. I'm looking for a way to apply some of these sort of ecosystem thoughts to K-12 education or for sort of early childhood education. Haven't come up with anything yet. Would love to hear ideas. I think in 10 years, it'll be obvious. And in 10 years, we're going to have a WPA for education. But we're not there yet.
Hello, this is Jorge from my focus. Jorge Mastrapa. My focus is actually on the areas of global leadership and organizational intelligence. But everything comes from actually developing from childhood and growing. One of my challenges, because I also work in the area of cultural diversity and inclusion, is the challenge that we're trying to bring people together from multiple cultures, from completely different backgrounds, from completely different levels of actual knowledge. And we want to bring them up and being able to reach the levels where they can be part of our developments in technology and science, etc. But the challenge that I see is that, and my original background is engineering, so you will hear what I say this right now. We are trying to give all these people all the wonderful things that we have with multiple learning systems. But what scares me a little bit is that we don't give them sometimes a baseline, or we don't give them a structure that they can use to learn how to learn. What I want to say with this one is, we talk about a lot of the individual options on how to learn. How about guided learning? Because when I was an engineer, one of the main challenges, and when I train people and I work with them in development, one of the main challenges that everybody, and I'm going to make it kind of a joke, but everybody wants to be the specialist. Everybody wants to be the wonderful statistician or the wonderful creator of an app that will solve the problems of the world. The problem is nobody tells many of these people that their ideas are great, but in order to be a statistician, you need to learn basic math. You need to learn how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, and move up to the food chain. Sometimes when we give people the option and we say, you can learn to program apps, and maybe you become a billionaire, but we never tell them that in order to learn how to be successful and to really program an app, you need all these initial steps, and people are jumping steps that otherwise should be natural. And that's where we have a problem, that people start rejecting education sometimes because they tried something that they were not ready for, and nobody told them. Everybody told them, you can learn this, but nobody told them, you need to go this way. And that's what we help people also, so they learn how to learn by giving them a blueprint that you can get here, but you need to start from here. And these are the right steps to get to this position.
So there are, I think there are a bunch of existing systems which provide those solutions. There's a bunch, I think, of new solution systems which could provide that same kind of structure in terms of thinking. And we were talking about it a minute ago too. The system that I talked about, the skillful system and everything, is intended to work on the basis of reputation. And reputation is solely based on, is the person who's being produced by this system, whatever it is, however it's structured, ready to take the job and be successful at it? And that's how we measure whether, that's how the employer points to it in the first place and says, this one works. So I'm hoping that with a powerful reputation system in place, it will allow us to optimize, or at least help us optimize, for the kinds of solutions which really prepare people to be statisticians or to be, pick anything and everything. I think getting the reputation into the system is a massive, and frankly, it's a step we haven't really been able to take at scale before. And this is one of those places where technology makes it different.
So I think Bob, you have a question there.
I like what you did on the leap jobs. The thing I'm an economist. I've been studying how the next phase of the internet and cloud services and Internet of Things is affecting the economy, jobs and GDP, et cetera. What I find a little bit concerning is that you're training people, but we don't really know how mobile or portable those skills are going to be. And what we're seeing more broadly is kind of an evolution of more digital jobs. So if you train somebody today to be a machinist in Boeing, you're basically training them for a dead-end job primarily.
Yeah.
The Boeing is really growing jobs that are monitoring sensor networks for their planes, monitoring service delivery, monitoring interactions with airlines, et cetera. Some of this is also very people-oriented. So there's a real disconnect here between you're trying to kind of throw everything against the wall so people get jobs right away, and how do we deal with this idea of getting skills that are more mobile and more applicable to things that are really emerging. Like, we know that there are tons of requests for jobs for data scientists and for computer security experts, and we've actually seen people like in Spotify form non-hierarchical teams where they've almost got guilds within the company where things get shared. Yep. And they've got coordinators who will say, you know, Group A did this, and it can now be used easily to help Group D do something. So it's not like you've got a batch of highly independent groups. You work out some way to kind of matrix what's going on within the company. And I think one of the challenges is, how do we begin to get these skills, and also how do we figure out what the direction of jobs is and what's really driving the economy? Because one of the things I've seen recently is that the Labor Department, when they look at what things are driving the economy, they're still measuring changes in the speed of server processors as a way to determine productivity and efficiency. They have no way of measuring the fact that we now run large data centers with software that really operates and drives the technology use in those data centers. Yep. We don't really train many people to be able to either manage those new networks of software or take advantage of the jobs that will emerge as these systems get changed, as we get software-defined networking in place, and as you can really do almost end-to-end communications from a device into a data center or into a peripheral computing and analytics center. And we really need, almost at the K level, to begin to develop these skills and have almost like a national awareness of the fact that we're not going to be able to train people for that many blue collar jobs, that even if you move people to where the jobs are today, you may be dead ending them in the near future.
It's true.
That's been a real problem with previous job training efforts that, you know.
Well, and that's the kind of thing that so I think first of all, I think you're totally right. I mentioned the idea of a leap job, and I think that the definition of leap job, I think, is better stated as you said it, which is it's something which I would say that it's something which not only provides you with predictable income and economic stability for a predictable period of time, which is to say for 3 to 5 years, something like that, but also arms you with skills which will be transferable to allow you to leap to the next thing, whatever it is. So we need to, and transferable is a much better way to put it. So we need to have a crisp definition of what that thing actually is. So I entirely agree with you. We need to find out what those skills are. We see the same thing at LinkedIn. We see the same thing you're seeing in terms of the transformation of these jobs. And we will be able to, we're working on this project now because we've one of the things which all these LinkedIn profiles actually give us an opportunity to do is to extract today's living, breathing skills taxonomy from the information we have in the system from 450 million working professionals. We can see the shift from manual, hand-driven, physically oriented skills, not all of them, but some of them remain very strong, to more digitally oriented skills. So we should be able to track that. And we want to make sure that's part of the definition of whatever that leap skill is. When I say we, I don't mean LinkedIn, I mean we, the world. So we know that we're pushing people in the right direction. I could not agree with you more, though, about technical capability, especially in terms of working with machines, as we identify what I would think of as new components of literacy. And to me, programming computers, working with computers is a new component of literacy. We need to somehow make them part of our overall approach to education and do it rapidly. There's no reason that anybody growing up in America who's 3 years old in America shouldn't know how to program a computer by the time they're 9. And they should certainly be fully facile using the devices that we use to control and interact with our world. But we already know that, so we need to make that happen. Part of it can come out of the kind of program we're talking about here, and part of it, I think, requires solid leadership to be able to identify those needs. We collectively, the people on this call, provide the data to allow our policymakers to make that choice and make sure it's part of the future. Or that's one path we should follow.
Yeah,
hey, Alan, this is Philip Farah. I'm a lifetime consultant, starting with McKinsey and more recently with Gartner. My question to you is on the nature of tomorrow's jobs, and you're describing them almost as if it was kind of these companies who have needs and hiring people. What's your view about a future where most of us would be free agents coming on project basis or engagement basis, not with a full-time job for a company, and where the company might be a digital organization? You would be working for a software in the middle who's organizing these different workers, making sure that the revenues are bigger than the costs, and the money is being generated, the value is being generated. So what's your view on kind of the changing nature of jobs and the disappearance of this kind of company-driven, centrally driven job?
So I have observed it since LinkedIn is my third startup, and no longer a startup. But we were able to essentially build LinkedIn with 8 people and about $500,000. If you tried to build LinkedIn right now, you would be able to create it with 4 people and $150,000, because the tools off the shelf make it so much easier. There is a general trend, that plus the fact that, as you say, the world of collaboration is allowing us to work much more in a much more distributed form, and the types of tasks that we can plug into each other are much more complex and robust. So, for instance, back in the day, we were all really excited when Amazon released Mechanical Turk. Mechanical Turk was this great thing which basically would allow totally interchangeable human beings to come in and do micro tasks. And micro tasks could be like typing out the content of a business card or whatever. It could be any of a large number of small, focused tasks. Those systems are now capable of taking 10 hours of computer QA and plugging it into a system. And there's no reason to believe that there's lots of opportunities for this kind of plug and play, sort of multiple assembly kind of work, where you're pulling people in who work on a project for just a few hours and then disappear and never return to it without any detriment to the quality of the product or the speed of the product itself, the speed of the production. So those things are all absolutely occurring. Completely agree. Whatever systems we build in order to be able to address this stuff has to be sensitive to allowing systems like that to function well in whatever ecosystem it is we actually build. Guaranteed that is the case. I would also say, though, that in the short term, we still do have big companies, and they have large piles of capital. And those large piles of capital are things which can get an ecosystem like this actually moving and churning forward. So long as the ecosystem they drive from the beginning is one which will work well also for their successors, for these micro companies or whatever, I think we will we'll be able to take advantage of the fact that capital is built up in these organizations today as a way of building an ecosystem which can be fundamental for many years, despite the fact that the sort of organizational formation will be very different.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Can you hear me?
Oh, Your microphone is a little bit distorted, as you can see by Alan's face.
Yes, you sound like an AI. So is that you, Siri?
This is Marcus from. Can you hear me?
Ooh, yeah. About 10 seconds.
It's not low.
Yeah, there's something. Can you try in a couple seconds after you have a microphone?
I don't. Maybe if I get closer.
Right. There's lots of background noise, so I'll just unmute you for a second until you can find a mic.
Marcus, you could also call in too. There's a call-in number.
We'll come back to you. If you call the call-in number, we'll come back to you.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Just simply type the question on the chat, and somebody can read it. That's
all the above works.
I'll read it if someone types it. Yeah.
Great.
So, anyone else with a question?
I have one question on this one, which is pretty much following. It is great, the idea of developing the ecosystem for learning, and I'm sorry I missed the initial portion of it in which it might have been addressed. But my question is, one of the things I've seen a lot in organizations is also the kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. How do we convince organizations that these people are actually needed and can help them? Because a lot of people go take a training, take a class, but we need the organizations also to understand these can provide them value, because at the end of the day, it's a supply and demand. If there is no demand, if the people who have to consume the product, because education is a product, how do we convince them that this is something that they can really use and have them engaged from the beginning, helping develop and asking for the skills that they will need?
Yeah. So that's the reason we're starting the ecosystem the way we're starting it, which is we're starting with these industries. There are 4 primary industries: advanced manufacturing, healthcare, essentially energy production or energy management, and IT, which is not an industry per se, it's more of a capability, a function, but which is needed by all industries. Those are the places, and to the point was made earlier, there's a lot of need for information security and so forth, and data science and so forth. So the places where there's great need are the places that we're starting. Because in the end, what we're trying to do is we're trying to move people to a place where the demand actually is. So I don't know how well this solution is going to solve problems for the places where the demand is low. It might not. I don't know. But the places where the demand is high, I believe, and having talked to these employers and observed how desperate they are to close the skills gap inside their own companies, we fully believe at this point, and we might be proved wrong, but we believe they're willing to play ball in a system like this. So that's kind of where we're starting. We expect over time there to be a rolling need for new skills for which no one is trained. And so there will always be these, not always, there will be, for the next 15 years, there will be pockets of intense demand as new skills appear in the marketplace, which no one is ready to pick up and no one has yet.
Okay, so last 5 minutes, Marcus, you've put in a good attempt to ask your questions, so you're up.
Oop, did we lose Marcus?
I'll just see if I can manually unmute you. Okay, go for it.
Okay, it's like I'm unmuted.
Go on.
Oh no.
Oh, did we lose again?
The audio is still messed up for some reason. If you type your question to me, I'll ask Alan.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
I'm not sure what that is.
Would I be able to jump in with a quick one?
Sure.
Alan, it's just in addition. So one it's Lucien from Brave New. So one question is this: you're a great systems thinker. Just reading some of your blogs, reading some of your work, you're seeing that big picture. I think one of the challenges here is that as systems thinkers and people that are synthesizing the challenge are actually relatively few. Yet they are those people that aren't necessarily thinking this have critical roles to play in shifting the ecosystem. Is there any way, if we think of this like a complex system with the different stakeholders in this ecosystem, have you any tips to us in the i4j community? Because I think one trend we have as a community is, you know, there's a lot of synthesizers here. Any tips of simplifying this and, you know, helping people see their role in this complex system without having to necessarily come at it from a systems thinking perspective?
Yeah, well, it's a really good question, and it's a problem I face on a regular basis. So I always make sure that I'm working with a set of people who are good at, who are extraordinarily good at working with a specific component or participant in the ecosystem. So whether it be marketing people, whether it be product managers, whether it be community organizers, in other words, people who I can work with until we understand what the overall system need actually is, but they take their piece and make that communication happen. Because I can, to a certain extent, I can tailor what I say to a specific community. Like, for instance, if I go to a community of educators, I hardly talk about any of this other stuff. I talk solely about how this is going to drive outcomes for your students, as an example. But with people who are really, really good at doing that, and it's important for us to work with them. It is like, to the point of diversity, even a diversity of skills is valuable. And this is a place where we need to lean on people who can help us make that translation.
It'd be really interesting if you could, you and possibly people from Markle could be integrated into some of the I4J meetings, or we might develop a group on, you know, future jobs and how does one go about addressing this issue that's fairly hot right now. So, I mean, if there's some way to
yeah, I mean, and that is well, that's gated only by my availability and the Markle availability, which is great. And I know we collectively can figure out a way to actually do that and to participate. One of the things which I would definitely recommend for I4J, and I recommend for everybody who's working on this project, is there is I said this earlier, there's an incredibly large set of people who are working on this from different angles and coming at it from very different places inside the economy and coming at it internationally and so forth. So figuring out a way to make sure that every time you discover one, you get them into the tent, I think is really important. And to rely on other groups, like, for instance, I sit on the board of a nonprofit called the Hope Street Group, and we have a focus at the Hope Street Group on doing this as well, which is focused specifically on transferable skills. And that effort is partially getting the transferable skill stuff working, but partially, how do you convene the set of people who are actually involved? So I highly recommend that you make this request, not just of Markle and so forth, but look for other people who are attacking it from a lot of different directions, and figure out a way to not only ignite that conversation, but also to make sure you take some I4J into those other organizations and make those conversations richer.
So just a quick question. Thanks, everyone. Quick question before we leave, because Marcus put in such an effort. Education has multiple purposes. This is what Marcus is asking, including creating an educated citizenry. Martin Ford made that point in his first book and suggested that a condition of a citizen salary is to get some general college education about history, democracy, economy, etc. Your thoughts on this and how it could fit into your approach?
So I will be more than happy to admit, maybe happy is not the right word, more than willing to admit that I have picked and chosen the problem that I'm trying to solve, or the problems that we're trying to solve here. And it definitely doesn't solve everything. And one thing with this is that this system is not, one of the things this is not intended to solve is a general problem of the question of the overall qualities and needs of education. It's definitely not intended to solve that problem. However, I don't think it blocks out those other needs for education. I think that in the end, for this system to work, we are going to need a general movement from a system where some people get general education and some people get skills-based education, to where everyone gets a general education and a skills-based education. So I need a skills-based education because I got to be able to use the tools necessary to be able to get something done. But I also need a general education in order to be able to think properly, and that includes thinking in a way which makes me a good citizen. And that goes for me whether I went to Stanford, whether I went to Stanford, or whether I'm like at Emily Griffith Technical College in Denver, Colorado. So in the end, those two things have to lie next to each other, because otherwise we're going to get people who who can't respond sufficiently to the training they receive for the changes they need to make in their own lives, on the one hand, and we're going to have people who actually don't have the skills necessary to be able to keep up with the change. So it's basically, that change, I believe it comes when we collectively can embrace the need. And that includes political will, it includes economic will, and it includes the technology and the sort of leadership that this group, the people here on this call, are providing.
Well, in the interest of time, and I know we could talk forever, Alan, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. I know we solved 3/4 of the world's problems today. We have a quarter to go, so we have a few more of these talks. And I will some way trick Alan into appearing again, not providing some sort of pressure in a video sense right now. But I want to say thank you very much, everybody. I thought this was fantastic. Great stuff. Stay tuned for next week when we have, it's actually weekly now, John Hagel, who is co-chair of Deloitte's Center for the Edge, is talking about when scalable efficiency is a trap. So again, back to everything you learned about how to build a company. So that's next Thursday, the 19th. And then after that is Kurt Carlson with another topic around the organization and its growth, which is your company is dying. Now, what do you do? So that's Wednesday, May 25th. So these aren't light topics, but they are experts talking about really cool growth issues that executives have and startup founders have. Everybody in between who has a job will have. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Alan. Awesome. We'll see you all again very soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.